For 8 years, Linda Evans was the face of Dynasty. She brought warmth to a show built on betrayal. The audience loved Crystal more than any other character. But by season 9, something broke. The producers cut her to 6 episodes. They shipped her character to Switzerland and never brought her back. The final episode barely mentioned her name. What fans never saw were the 18-hour days, the real injuries, and the tension that made every scene feel like a battle. The way they let her go will change how you see the show. Linda Evans was born Linda Evenstad on November 18, 1942, in Hartford, Connecticut. She was the second of 3 daughters, growing up in a home filled with music and movement because both her parents were professional dancers. They performed together and lived a life built around rehearsals and shows. The name Evenstad carried a story of its own. It came from a small farm in Nes, Hedmark, Norway, where her great-grandmother once lived before making the long trip to America in 1884. She crossed the Atlantic with her young son and other relatives, leaving behind the old world to start again. Before she was old enough to remember anything, her life had already changed direction. When she was just 6 months old, her parents packed up and moved the family to North Hollywood in 1943 because dancing work was easier to find there. She grew up in California and never remembered Connecticut at all. So Hollywood became the only home she really knew. Linda went to school like any other kid and later attended Hollywood High School, surrounded by students who dreamed of making it in the entertainment world. When she turned 14, something inside her held her back. She became painfully shy and found it hard to talk to people or even look them in the eye. Her parents worried about how quiet she had become and encouraged her to take drama classes, hoping that standing in front of others would help her open up. Acting began as a kind of treatment for her shyness, but once she started, something shifted. The stage that once felt frightening slowly became a place where she felt safe. The classes showed her a talent she never knew she had, and pointed her toward the career that would shape her life. Not long after, chance stepped in. When she was 15, she went with a friend to an audition for a television commercial, planning only to sit quietly and offer support. She never meant to audition herself, yet the casting people noticed her and chose her instead. That single moment started everything. Soon after the commercial, she landed a small television role and began to see a future she had never planned. As she moved closer to acting full-time, she decided to change her last name from Evenstad to Evans. The original name connected her to her Norwegian roots but sounded unfamiliar to many people, and Evans was easier to remember and pronounce. Her first real television role came in October 1960 when she was 18. She appeared on Bachelor Father and was still credited as Linda Evenstad at the time. In the episode, she played a young girl who develops a crush on the main character Bentley Gregg, played by John Forsythe. It was only a small part, yet it marked the beginning of her screen career. Neither of them could have known that many years later they would meet again as husband and wife on Dynasty, becoming one of television's most famous couples. After that debut, she kept working and began landing recurring appearances on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet from 1960 to 19. As the early 60s continued, she appeared on many different shows including The Lieutenant, Wagon Train, My Favorite Martian, and The Untouchables. Most of the roles lasted only 1 episode. By the time she reached her early 20s, she had built a long list of credits but still had no steady role. Casting directors often focused on her appearance before anything else, and she was told again and again that she was too pretty for serious parts. In 1965, she appeared in the beach movie Beach Blanket Bingo, playing a singer named Sugar Cane. Her singing voice in the film was dubbed by another performer, so audiences never heard her real voice even though she played a singer. At the time, she had a contract with MGM that paid about $250 a week, which was steady work but far from stardom. That opportunity finally appeared later in 1965 when she was cast as Audra Barkley on The Big Valley. She was 23 years old and had never held a major role before. The Western series followed a powerful ranching family, and Audra was the spirited daughter who stood alongside her brothers and mother in running the land. The show lasted 4 seasons and more than 100 episodes, turning Linda into a familiar face across the country. She performed demanding scenes that included horse riding, falls, and fights, determined to make the action look real. During the years of The Big Valley, she faced deep personal loss when her mother died. The pain left her shaken, yet on the set she found comfort from Barbara Stanwyck, who played the family matriarch. One quiet day, Stanwyck looked at her and said she would be her mother from now on, and from that moment she kept the promise. Stanwyck guided her through grief and shared lessons about acting and life drawn from decades in the business. The bond stayed strong for years, and Linda later said that time changed her forever. Everyone on the set respected Stanwyck so deeply that they called her Missy, a warm nickname that reflected both affection and admiration. She arrived early, knew her lines, and kept the production running smoothly. Linda learned discipline from watching her work day after day. The show ended in May 19. Around the time the show began, another story had started quietly behind the scenes. In September 1965, she met actor John Derek while working on The Big Valley. He was 16 years older and already known for relationships with younger women, yet Linda fell deeply in love with him. They married in Mexico in December 1968, and at first it felt like a dream. Soon after, his influence over her life began to grow stronger. He guided her career decisions and often pushed her to turn down work because he wanted her attention focused on their marriage. Opportunities slipped away, including major roles that might have lifted her career even higher. Their relationship grew more strained as time passed. Then in 1973, everything broke apart when he became involved with a teenage girl named Mary Kathleen Collins while working overseas. The affair ended the marriage. Linda separated from him that year, and the divorce was finalized in August 1974. The experience left her heartbroken and deeply shaken. After her painful divorce from John Derek in 1974, Linda Evans tried to rebuild her life as quickly as she could. On Christmas Day in 1973, Derek told her he was leaving, and the woman he chose was a 17-year-old girl named Mary Kathleen Collins, who the world would later know as Bo Derek. Linda was only 32 when everything fell apart. A year later, on July 4, 1975, she married real estate broker Stan Herman. She had known him for about a year and believed this new marriage would bring peace back into her life. Instead, it slowly revealed how much hurt she was still carrying. The marriage lasted 4 years and ended in divorce in 19 years later. She admitted that the pain from Derek's betrayal made her ignore warning signs. By 1977, she finally landed a regular role on a series called Hunter. She played Marty Shaw, a former prostitute who became involved in dangerous espionage missions. The show ran for only 13 episodes before it was canceled. After that, she accepted whatever work she could find. During those years, she often took roles simply to stay visible. She appeared several times on The Love Boat between 1981 and 1984, playing different characters. These appearances kept her name alive, but the pay was modest. Turning 40 in November 1982 made those fears even stronger. Hollywood was focused on younger actresses, and roles for women over 35 were already rare. From the end of The Big Valley until the early 80s, she had managed only a small number of television appearances and a handful of films, many of which failed at the box office. Derek's influence during their marriage had made the situation worse because he discouraged her from working at all. Yet the same heartbreak that once crushed her also gave her the push she needed. After her divorce from Herman in 1979, she finally called her agent and made it clear that she wanted to work again. The determination that came from those painful years slowly led her toward the opportunity that would change everything. In 1981, she faced a moment that felt like a final test. Producers offered her the role of Crystal Carrington on a new series called Dynasty. It had been years since she held a major role, and even her agent warned that people in the industry might have forgotten her. She pushed past the fear and accepted the role, believing she had nothing left to lose. When the show premiered in January 1981, it pulled her out of obscurity and placed her back in the spotlight. Working on Dynasty also reunited her with John Forsythe. More than 20 years earlier, she had appeared on Bachelor Father as a young girl with a crush on his character. Now they played husband and wife as Blake and Crystal Carrington. The connection between them came naturally and soon became one of the strongest parts of the show. Their friendship off-screen lasted for decades, and many fans felt their bond was the heart of Dynasty. The series itself grew into a television sensation. It began with a modest response but slowly gained strength. The arrival of Joan Collins as Alexis in the second season pushed the drama even further, and the ratings climbed year after year. By the middle of the decade, Dynasty became the most-watched show on television. Millions tuned in each week to watch the Carrington family fight for power and loyalty inside their Denver mansion. As the success grew, Linda Evans became one of the highest-paid actresses on television. Her salary increased each season and soon placed her among the top earners in the industry. After years of uncertainty, she finally enjoyed financial security. Recognition followed the success. She won the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Drama Series in 1982 and received several more nominations in the years that followed. She also earned an Emmy nomination and collected multiple People's Choice Awards as viewers voted her their favorite television actress year after year. The show changed again in late 1981 when Joan Collins joined the cast as Alexis Colby. Her arrival brought a new kind of energy that quickly transformed the series. The rivalry between Alexis and Crystal became one of the main attractions, and viewers loved watching the two women battle for control. Producers encouraged the tension because it added excitement to the story, and rumors of real-life conflict began to spread. Their first major confrontation set the tone. During one early scene, Alexis hurled an insult at Crystal with sharp intensity. After the cameras stopped, Linda asked Joan if the line had been meant personally, and Joan answered that it was simply acting. The moment created distance between them, and from then on their relationship stayed cool. They avoided each other whenever possible, and the uneasiness often showed during filming. One of the most famous scenes came in 1983 when the two characters fought beside a lily pond. The actresses performed the scene themselves without doubles, and the struggle left both of them bruised and exhausted. Filming took days to complete, and the episode drew huge ratings when it aired. The fight became one of the most remembered moments in television drama and helped keep the show at the top. Behind the scenes, the tension continued to grow. There were delays, disagreements, and constant adjustments to scripts and schedules. Crew members noticed the strain, and directors often had to calm situations before filming could continue. Despite everything, the friction seemed to feed the drama on screen, and the audience remained fascinated by the rivalry. John Forsythe always found it easier to work with Linda. He later said their partnership felt natural and comfortable, while his scenes with Joan were more complicated. Joan Collins later wrote about the tension in her memoir, explaining that they never truly connected and often saw things in completely different ways. Linda, on the other hand, tried years later to leave the past behind. She reached out to Joan several times, hoping they might work together again on a reunion project. Joan declined politely and chose to move on with her own plans. By 1988, the long run had started to catch up with Linda Evans. For 7 straight years, she had lived inside the world of Dynasty, and the pace never slowed. Most filming days began early in the morning and stretched deep into the night, sometimes running from 6 in the morning until close to midnight. The last few seasons were the hardest, because there were no real breaks at all. Even when cameras stopped rolling, the work did not end. There were interviews, photo shoots, and more than 100 public appearances every year. At first, she tried to see it as a blessing. She called the success a gift, and she knew how lucky she was, but deep inside she felt trapped. The schedule grew heavier while the show became more chaotic, and producers kept pushing for bigger drama. She filmed rough fight scenes with Joan Collins, and sometimes went home with real bruises after being hit by props or falling on hard floors. By the time Season 8 came to an end in March 1988, she had appeared in every single episode, even though her body was worn down and her energy was almost gone. She was earning $100,000 for each episode and making millions every year, yet none of that filled the growing emptiness she felt. When Season 9 began, the writers placed Crystal into a coma storyline, partly to explain why she would be missing from many episodes. Only a few months later, in 1989, Linda walked away after appearing in just 6 episodes. The decision stunned fans because she had become one of the biggest stars on television, but exhaustion finally won. She disappeared from Hollywood and retreated to her property in Washington, hoping that distance and quiet would help her recover. Around the same time, the show itself began to slip. Dynasty had once dominated television, but by the late 80s, the ratings started to fall. Season 8 dropped far below the top shows, and fewer people tuned in each week. Episodes that once drew huge audiences now struggled to hold attention, and the network grew nervous as advertising money declined while production costs stayed high. Linda's contract reached its end right after the final episode of Season 8. She had signed on when the show first began in 1981, and now she finally had the choice to leave. Producers asked her to return, and she agreed to appear in a limited number of episodes, though the writers kept her character mostly off-screen. The falling ratings forced the producers to cut costs wherever they could. Sets were reused instead of building new ones, and more scenes were filmed outdoors because it was cheaper than lighting large interiors. Even the stars saw their roles reduced as salaries climbed and profits shrank. Behind all of this, Linda's struggle was becoming more personal. After playing Crystal for years, she began to feel that the character had taken over her identity. She later said she needed to discover who she really was beyond the role. The constant work and pressure brought anxiety and moments of panic, and once she left the series, she sank into a deep sadness that surprised her. When season 9 began in late 1988, viewers quickly noticed something was different. Crystal Carrington had always been at the center of the story, yet now she appeared only in the early episodes. Linda showed up in 6 out of 22 episodes, and then she was gone. Without her presence, the family drama felt colder, and the show lost some of its heart. To explain her absence, the writers created a medical storyline. Crystal began to suffer from severe headaches and soon learned she had a brain tumor connected to an old accident. Doctors warned that the surgery would be risky and might not succeed, and the only place to attempt it was in Switzerland. Before leaving, she and Blake rushed into a quiet wedding ceremony. After the operation, she slipped into a coma, and that became her final moment on screen. From then on, Crystal existed only in conversations. Blake returned home alone, speaking about her condition while the audience never saw her again. The writers left the story open in case Linda decided to come back, but she never did. The final episode of the series barely mentioned Crystal at all, ending instead with a dramatic cliffhanger. Fans felt frustrated because the woman who had carried the show for so long simply disappeared without a real farewell. Linda had agreed to the reduced role because she needed space from the exhausting routine that had filled nearly a decade of her life. When the series ended in May 1989, only a few months after her last appearance, it confirmed what many viewers already felt. Without Crystal, Dynasty could not hold together. After leaving Hollywood, Linda chose a life that felt completely different from the world she had known. She stepped away from regular acting while still in her 40s and slowly built a quiet home in rural Washington. The property stretched across many acres with a river running through it, and deer wandered freely across the land. Members of her family settled nearby, and the place grew into a small circle of people she trusted and loved. The noise of Hollywood faded into the distance, replaced by long walks, simple meals, and peaceful mornings. Instead of film sets and makeup rooms, her days filled with ordinary work. She chopped firewood, cared for the land, and spent time with her dog on long walks. She practiced yoga and strength training to keep her body strong, and she found joy in cooking and sharing meals with family. The quiet life felt rich in a way fame never had. There were difficult moments along the way. In 2014, she was arrested for driving under the influence of prescription medication, and the news surprised many who still remembered her as the flawless Crystal. Yet even that became part of her journey toward honesty about the struggles she had faced. Her retreat from acting began soon after Dynasty ended. Aside from a reunion project and a few small appearances, she stayed away from the screen and eventually stopped acting altogether. The choice puzzled many people because she had reached the height of success, but she felt that fame had taken too much from her already. She wanted to live as herself instead of trying to match an image created for television. During those years, she explored new directions. She appeared in television promotions and tried unusual projects, and at one point she even promoted a face mask that promised to reduce wrinkles. Later, she surprised viewers again by competing in a cooking show and winning through patience and determination rather than glamour. She also began writing about her life, sharing memories through recipes and stories that connected her to family and friends.